Hi everyone, welcome to the first live FR practice session for the December 2022 exam attempt. I am your tutor, Aleena Kareem. Today we are going to discuss the queries that you have with respect to your FR exam, and the students who have already enrolled in the comprehensive study support course. For them, they must have covered the content which was allocated for the first week. So far, the content that you have covered, if you have any questions related to that, we are going to discuss them. So whoever we have live on the screen, we want you to share, first of all, that how much course have you studied so far? So any update, if you're giving your exam in December, if you're giving your FR exam in December, please quickly share how much course content have you covered so far? So yes, we can see some of the students, they have already covered the content which was allocated initially. We had mostly standards related to non-current assets allocated for the first week. So which included IS 16, IS 38, talking about some portion of impairment. Then we had IS 23, IS 1, conceptual framework. So glad to know that you have covered them so far. Now, over here, we are going to discuss today the questions that you have related to these topics. Some questions were shared with us in advance by the students via email because, as you know, the students are continuously in connection with the tutors through our email system. So what I did was that I've answered the individual queries which were there with respect to specific questions. And now we are going to discuss the generic queries which were there for us. So guys, here we are. I've opened the screen in case I need to write something as well. So over here, we are going to start off with the first question that has been put to us. Okay, we have some questions. I'll be taking all the questions simultaneously as they're coming live, and the ones that we have already shared with us. So we got one question where a student has asked that how much time is to be recommended on the section A and B in the exam questions. And one of the students is saying that I've covered most of the topics, but I need to go through the questions again and again, as that's extremely important. Whatever questions have been allocated, you have a very big resource material available. So we have the material which was covered during the lectures also. Then we have additional practice questions allocated to you. We had the assignment given to you. In that also, you had objective test questions, and plus you have the kits also available. So covering all of that is very important, and that's the whole purpose. Understand the concept that is to be solved. Okay. Now, I'll come to your question regarding the mark allocation. So let's start with it one by one. So we have one question from Saira. She is asking that what if a student fails financial reporting on 41? Saira, I will say that you need to revisit and see what exactly went wrong. Now, there are two ways in which you can check that. First of all, see the examiner report, which is available for your exam attempt. The examiner shares with you the objective test questions, which are the worst attempted objective test questions also. And other than that, you get the marking scheme also of the questions that were there in the exam. Most likely, at least one or maybe both the questions you'll see are going to be there in the marking scheme as well. Now, in that case, you need to evaluate where did you go wrong. Honestly speaking, if you're talking about 41, it ultimately means that somewhere you missed out the 59 marks of the exam, right? So this means that there is definitely some conceptual misunderstanding. Now, this is something for which I will strongly recommend that go through the course content again and then focus on the practice area. We'll cover some techniques regarding getting the maximum marks in the exam, but over here, I will strongly recommend that go through the content again first. So if you are doing I-16, don't just go to the questions, go through the concepts again. Because over here with 41, it means that there is some, you can say, some gap in the conceptual knowledge also, right? So go through that, then attempt the questions which are there. Focus a lot on the practice questions. 41 means you have a good base already. Build up on that, clarify the concepts that are there, see the marking scheme to identify what are the items, if you have your paper in mind, what are the items and how you would have attempted them. In that case, and a good starting point can be that you cover the course and you try to attempt the question which is there in the latest past exam paper again and mark yourself. So that's something which is very important, that cover the concepts, do a lot of practice, and then get your attempted questions marked so that you are able to understand where is the lacking happening. Okay, so please go through it again properly, and if you need any support, we're always there for you. Okay, so we had a question that which topics are tested in the section A and similarly in section B of the exam. Now, guys, remember that in your section A of the exam, which is the objective test questions, and the section B of the exam, I will cover actually all three sections. So section A of the exam consists of OTs, which are objective test questions. Remember, anything from anywhere in your syllabus can be tested in your objective test portion of the exam. But remember, the type of questions, they are restricted, right? So we have discussed in our course also that there are 7 possible types of questions which can appear, like MCQs, MTQs, fill in the blanks, hotspot, etc. So I always tell my students that something that the examiner has already told you in advance, it should not come as a surprise for you in the exam, right? So you should know what are the possible type of questions that can be tested. As for the content coverage, your section A of the exam can test your knowledge from anywhere in the syllabus, right? Anywhere in the syllabus. Same for section B. If you're talking about section B, your questions, you have one scenario, and related to that, there are 5 independent questions. Now, in the section B also, it's very clear that there is going to be a scenario and there are going to be 5 independent questions. What do I mean by 5 independent questions? So your section B can never have a question in which they say, okay, so calculate the cost of the asset in the first question, and based on that calculate the depreciation in the second one, or let's suppose gain or loss on disposal in the second one. That's not the case, right? So in your section B also, there are going to be 5 independent questions with every scenario. And these 5 questions again can come up from any part of the syllabus, right? And they are going to be linked to the scenario which has been shared. So multiple standard questions are tested. A common format is that normally around 3 to 4 numerical questions are tested and 1 or 2 theoretical questions are tested over here. And this is a very good tip for you, that when you're covering your standards, do focus on the theory also, because your section B of the exam is something which is going to test your theory of the standards also. And normally these are very easy marks because you get straightforward questions, straightforward testing of theory of the standards. So that's going to be there. And in the section C, now section C is something in which the question types are particular. So in the section C, you can get either a question on final accounts, or you can get a question on consolidation, or you can get a question on ratio analysis, or you can get a part of a question on statement of cash flows, right? So these are the types of questions that can be tested in the section C of the exam. Definitely speaking, when you talk about content for final accounts question, you need to know the standards. But if we talk about the type of questions per se which are going to be tested in the section C, so that's final accounts, consolidation, can be P&L, can be statement of financial position, can be a mixture of both, a small portion of cash flows, and compulsory there is going to be a question on the ratio analysis also. So I hope now it's clear how the structure of the exam is going to look like in terms of the topic. So we have more questions coming in. Let me take a quick look. Time allocation. I think I'm going to discuss next what the time allocation is going to be, because we have a question over here. So again, I will talk about all 3 sections of the exam with respect to time allocation. Now, guys, as you know, a standard rule normally is that you have, you can say approximately 1.8 minutes available per mark in the exam. Yes, that's true for FR also. But in FR, if we are talking about the overall time allocation, then we have what we can say a challenge with respect to the structure of the exam also. So when we are talking about the structure, then the section C of the exam is something in which you have to do a lot of typing, and you have to take a longer time to read the question also. So what I will recommend in this regard is that you allocate a balanced time to your section A, B on one hand and section C on the other. So my recommendation in this regard is that you have a 3-hour exam. Out of that, split it into 2 halves. 1.5 hours for your section C and 1.5 hours for your section A and section B. 1.5 hours when you have for section A and B, as you know, they are both of 30 marks each. So for section A, allocate 45 minutes. For section B, allocate 45 minutes. This is sufficient time for you to read the questions of section A and B, interpret them, and answer the questions. Remember, your objective test questions, you are not supposed to type anything other than the digits in the fill-in-the-blank question. So yes, you need to read the question, which is going to be short, so it's not going to be a lot of consumption of reading time. Then you're given the options also. In case of MCQs, MTQs, hotspot, in all of these questions, you are given the options also. So, it's something which supports you in deciding what the answer is going to be. So this part of the exam, it should not consume the majority of the chunk of the time that is going to be there, right? So allocate 45 minutes to your section A, practice accordingly. And once that is done, if you have confusion in any question, you can flag a question. You can come back to that later on. Your examiner will never know you had flagged a question, so don't worry about that. A flag question is not going to have any impact on your final marks. So just separately solve them. Come to section B, 45 minutes for that. Complete them and then move on to the section C of the exam. There you have 1.5 hours. Again, try to allocate 45 minutes each for the CR questions. Once your 45 minutes are over, guys, remember this. Spending extra time on existing questions is always going to get you lesser marks as compared to solving a new question, because every question has easy marks allocated on them. So once your time bar is over for a certain section, move on to the next one, flag the ones which are left or any concept that you need to cover in CR, and then come back to it in the end of the exam if you have time left. Okay, so that's the distribution that I recommend for the marking for the solving of section A, B, and C of the exam. I hope that's clear. If there is any follow-up question to these questions, you can always drop a message in the chat box, or if you're joining us through social media, you can comment on the post and I will read and respond to that. Okay, so a question which is from a bit ahead from our course plan, but because we got it, I'm going to answer that. Is there any trick that you would recommend to be followed when deciding how a financial instrument is to be in a question of financial instruments? How is that going to be classified? Whether it's going to be fair value through P&L or fair value or any other way? Absolutely. It is the easiest thing in the world to classify a financial instrument. Remember, let me just write a bit for you. Remember that whenever we are talking about a financial instrument is always a contract which gives rise to financial asset on one side and financial liability or equity instrument on the other side. I'm going to make it in two different ways. So there is going to be a contract which is going to give rise to financial asset on one side and a financial liability or equity instrument on the other side. So this is a given. This is how an instrument is going to be. There is no third type of financial instrument. So definitely there's going to be financial asset on one side. On the other side, either there is going to be a liability or there is going to be an equity component. Now, the good part, guys, with respect to FR is that over here, the financial instruments are tested to a very limited extent. So the examiner just expects from you to know what he has told that he's going to test in the exam, right? So when we are talking about such instruments, when you have a financial asset, the first thing you need to see is that what's there on the other side. Is there a financial liability on the other side, or is there an equity instrument on the other side, right? Now, if there is a financial liability, we covered that, then the instrument can be classified either at fair value through P&L or at amortized cost. There's no third option. There are only two options: at fair value through P&L or through amortized cost, right? And in that case, there are certain complications in this, but you don't need to know them at this point in time. Once we go further ahead in the syllabus, then we'll discuss the complications in this also. So over here, when you have to classify it as fair value through P&L or at amortized cost, then you have to see that an instrument can be classified at amortized cost only if there are contractual cash flows and the timings of those cash flows is confirmed. So if again these two conditions are fulfilled, then only you are going to you are going to see that the instrument is a financial liability on the other side, and out of them it can either be amortized cost. If it doesn't fit the criteria of amortized cost, then automatically it's going to go to fair value through P&L, right? So this is for the liability portion. Then when you come to equity, remember, one hand financial asset, on the other hand it is your equity component. Again, remember, For equity, it can never be classified at amortized cost. So it's always going to be just at fair value through P&L or fair value through OCI. Okay, so there we have a specific criteria. If the item is held for trade in the short term, then it's at fair value through P&L. If it is held for the purpose of getting the returns in the long term, then it is going to be classified as fair value through OCI. So this is the simplest classification that you can use, and this is enough for your FI exam, right? You're going to see a complicated version in SBR exam also, but for now, this is the enough knowledge that you need. Always identify first whether there is a liability on the other end or equity. If there is liability, it can be amortized cost or fair value through P&L. If it is equity, it can be it can be fair value through P&L or OCI. For amortized cost, the criteria is very straightforward. Contractual cash flows and timings are confirmed. If any of these criteria is not fulfilled, it cannot be amortized cost, and automatically it's going to be fair value through P&L. In case of equity, it's going to be fair value through OCI or fair value through P&L. If it is held for short-term trading, then P&L. If for long-term getting of benefits and earning dividends, then it's going to be at fair value through OCI. Okay, I hope this clarifies. Let me just take a quick look. As I have some of the questions coming on this side, which is why I'm looking on my other side of the screen. So we have another question that I am just relying on the concept building through practicing numerical questions. Any suggestion how much of theory to prepare in the online exam? Remember, guys, because this is coming from an enrolled student, you already have access to the notes for financial reporting in your ECampus platform. The theory which is there in your notes, that is enough for you. We've made a slightly simplified version of the notes. So that theory is enough for you, which is why we have made it a slightly, you can say a compact set of notes so that it's easier for you to study. But that theory is enough for you to cover the questions which are going to come up in your financial reporting exam. Manahil, we have, yes, absolutely. Any asset can be an internally generated asset, provided it fulfills the criteria of development expenditure. That's the main thing. So any internally generated intangible asset, it can be capitalized, provided it meets the criteria of development expenditure. As for the solution, Manahil, the solution for the first assignment is already available. The detailed solution is already available for you in your eCampus platform. You need to revisit it. There is, when you click on the questions, there is see the solution tab, and from that you can access the answer also. We have another question by ZK, one of our enrolled students. ZK, you will have the access to the recording of this session in your practice platform. Okay? Done. So we had some other questions. Thank you. Well explained. Thank you so much. I hope it is clarifying the queries which were there. So then we had some more questions. We can see another question on our screen, that what is the difference between impairment loss and revaluation loss? Now, interestingly, a very frequently asked question. Remember, guys, there are only two standards in the world which use revaluation model. Okay, we've seen revaluation model, the name, and we've seen fair value model, the name. They're not the same. Okay, revaluation model is something different. Fair value model is something different. So in case of revaluation model, you have the specific criteria is fulfilled, in which you first have to move towards revaluation model, then you have to calculate the revalued value at regular intervals, etc., etc. Now, in that case, remember, the gain goes to OCI, the loss goes to P&L. Now, when we are talking about impairment loss, remember in IS 16 also we said that there can be a cost model and there can be a revaluation model. Now, in the cost model also, there is a possibility that the value of the asset goes below its carrying value. So Impairment loss is something which happens on assets as a result of decrease in their value. If those assets are held at a revaluation model, then we call the impairment loss the revaluation loss. They're not two separate things. In case of a revaluation loss, if your asset is being held at a revaluation model and its carrying value is below the recoverable, it's right now showing higher than the recoverable value, we have to charge the revaluation loss on it, and that loss is the same as the impairment loss. However, every impairment loss is not a revaluation loss, because impairment loss we apply to the assets which are held on cost model. We apply them to cash generating units. So generally speaking, all the decrease in value of the assets is called impairment loss, but the ones which are held on revaluation model, their impairment loss can also be called a revaluation loss. Okay, I hope this clarifies the concept, a very common misconception by the students. Remember, for a revalued asset, we're not going to, charge revaluation loss separately and then let's suppose charge impairment loss separately. No, that's one and the same thing. Okay. Okay, so we have another question, that what is the recommended method for students that are working? Now, Umar has asked this question. Umar, see, when you joined SKANS ECampus, I think that's where you found the solution to being a working professional. Why? Because, when a lecture is being delivered live, there can be pauses in it. There can be some extra time spent in it. There can be interaction, which is, let's suppose if you're coming to the campus, you need time to come to college, go back, etc. But when you enrolled in SKANS ECampus, you got the access to a pre-recorded, and I must mention edited pre-recorded versions of all the topics. So in that case, you have the exact recording available. And if you calculate the overall time, let's suppose your whole course, it's going to be covered in, let's suppose, for example, I'm just taking an example. Let's suppose your whole course is being covered in 30 hours. Let's suppose it is being covered in 40 hours. So now you can imagine that if the whole course is being covered in, like, let's suppose 35, 40 hours, then over a span of even 1 month, you can easily cover the recordings. I will recommend that take up one topic at least per day, cover it. Once again, you have the biggest advantage that the recording is available there. You can, if you feel it's too slow for you, you can increase the speed. If you feel it's too fast for you, you can decrease the speed. So you can use it as per your tempo, whatever time you get. But the key to success is to be regular and do practice also. Don't just listen to the recordings, solve the practice questions also which have been allocated with these recordings. That said, if you're just regular along with your work, you can easily cover FR. No problem at all. The content is not that much. Okay, I hope this clarifies. Okay, how is conceptual framework tested in the exam? Okay. So remember, guys, in your conceptual framework questions, because you have an exam which is for which 2 portions are objective test questions based, and only the third part is CR based, and that also I've told you how that's going to be structured. So your conceptual framework questions, they are going to be mainly based on the you can say the theory part which is there, either in the section A of the exam or in the section B of the exam. So majority, you may get a definition that hasn't happened so far. So if it is, completely tested out of the blue, then in the CR question, you might get a definition also, but that hasn't happened. And the examiner has not told about it. So the major thing is that it is going to be tested straightforward conceptually in the section A and section B of the exam in a 2-mark question. And in the section C, basically you apply conceptual framework when you are making, let's suppose, fund accounts or consolidated statements. Okay. We have another question, that apart from the materials in the platform, what else do you think we should use? Very good question, Umar. You have available materials, which are number one, the past exam paper questions. It's a must. You need to do them before going to the exam. I forbid you from going into the exam if you haven't covered that. That jokes apart here. So I can't emphasize enough on the importance of the past exam paper questions. So make sure, and guys, this has happened in the past. You can, it's not just my claim, you can see it in the past exam papers, that something which was tested in the past exams, a portion of it, let's suppose, came up in exactly the same way, just with different figures, just with slightly different figures. So, by solving the past exam paper questions, you're solving something exactly exam level, right? So make sure you solve all the past exam papers. It has all the CRs questions which have been published every year. Then, very importantly, you have examiner reports which are issued after every exam session. And your examiner reports include the worst attempted questions of that session also. So in every exam, you get 3-4 questions in every report, and that's how a database can be made. And thirdly, you have examiner approved kits which are available for practice. So whichever one is easily accessible for you, take that up and solve that also. You can get it online also. Maybe if it's available locally for you, that's also a choice. But do solve one kit also, which is an examiner approved kit. Okay, so Mohammed Nasir has asked, what is the best way to master the syllabus and cover every angle? Nasir, once again, if I'm talking about SKANS ECampus, covering the recordings only actually means that we've covered, you can say, 98% of the exam content. So the knowledge part of it. So I will keep a margin of 1-2% because there can be something which is there for reading purposes and it's not there in the recorded version. But properly go through all the lectures. So understand the concept first. That's the first point. And later on, focus a lot on the practice. I've just told you the resources. You have ECampus material, which is completely unique. You have past exam papers, you have examiner reports, and you have the practice kits also. So these 4 materials, if these are done properly, trust me, you're done with it. And very importantly, do attempt the mock exam, which is there at the end of the session. So mock exam also gives you a very good idea that if there is anything which has been left behind and anything that you need to cover up as well. So practice a lot and either mark your practice yourself or get it marked through us. Okay, I hope that helps. Okay, so another question is slightly similar to the one that was previously asked, that do we need to learn the criteria for an item to be classified as a development expenditure? The answer is yes. Why? There are 2 reasons to it. Number 1, the development criteria can come up as straightforward theory in your exam. So I was telling you that in the section A and the section B of the exam, there might be a straightforward question which is testing the knowledge of the standard. Okay, so that is possible. If that comes in, yes, you need to know the criteria for that. And secondly, whenever the question of development is going to come up, and trust me, that comes up quite frequently. So whenever there is going to be a question on development expenditure, it is always going to require from you to understand what are the development criteria and apply them in the exam. So if you don't know the criteria, definitely speaking, you can't apply them to the figures in the exam. So make sure, yes, that you remember the criteria, all 6 points, and you apply them accordingly. You're most welcome, Nasir. So, how is the theory of standards tested in the exam? Now, guys, definitely when you were talking about the testing of the theory, again, the point over here is that, as I said, in the section A of the exam and in the section B of the exam, there is a very high likelihood that the standard theory is going to be tested. So we can see the average that in the section B of your exam, if you have 15 questions, which are 3 questions with 5 subparts each, 15 objective test questions are there. Then out of these, at least 4 to 5 are going to be straightforward theory questions. So for that, you need to know the theory of the standard. Same is the case with this section A. In section C, there is a slightly lesser likelihood for standards to be tested for theory portion while you're solving consolidation. But while you're solving the final counts question, once again, if you know the theory, you can answer it properly. And in the ratio analysis questions also, there are a lot of times in which the situations require you to make a reference to the relevant standard also. So in that case also, you need to know the theory so that you can apply it in the scenario in the exam. Okay? So we have a question over here. Let me just take that. Imad, I think I've already answered your question. Imad has asked that whether the practice questions and assignment in the eCampus platform are enough. Imad, I've just shared that there are other practice materials also, and practice is never enough. You can never say that, if I cover just this portion, that's more than enough. No, that's not the case. Do as much practice as possible, and please focus on the past exam papers and the kits also. Manahil, you can drop an email to our customer services, which is cs@skanscampus.com, and they will get back to you with respect to your particular questions. Okay. So we got another conceptual question, and that is that what is the difference between nominal rate of interest and effective rate of interest? Remember, guys, when you go to get a loan from, let's suppose, a bank, now, guys, you are accountants, you're not lay people, okay? So if a layman goes to the bank and gets a loan, and the manager tells that, okay, we're going to charge an 8% markup on it, we say, fine, 8% is the cost. And this cost is called the nominal rate of interest. So the principal amount of the loan and the interest rate, which is going to be there as it is. But other than that, if let's suppose we went and we took the loan, and let's suppose I took a loan of 1,000. So let me just show it. So I took a loan of 1,000, and then there was an issuance cost of the loan, which was of 100. Then there was interest, which was 10%. And then the examiner said that, the bank said that there is going to be a premium on redemption. So the bank said that this 1,000, when you come back to give it, we are going to charge you 1,200 for it. Okay, so now in this case, a layperson, if you ask them that if you ask a layperson that what exactly is the cost of taking that loan, he would say 10%. But you're not lay people, you're accountants. So you will say that yes, the 10% interest is something which they have to pay. Then secondly, the issuance cost is also a part of it. It is directly attributable expense. Had we not taken this loan, this cost would not have been incurred. And number 3, we have to pay 200 extra at the time of redemption also. This also we would not have paid had we not taken this loan. So there is 10% interest rate, and then there is 300, which is the issuance cost and premium on redemption. These are also costs. Remember, had we not taken this loan, we wouldn't have incurred this issuance cost. Had we not taken this loan, we wouldn't have incurred this premium on redemption, right? So combined, let's suppose we calculate and it comes out to be 14%. Now this 14% is going to be your effective rate of interest, and the 10% is the nominal rate of interest. Okay, so this is how we calculate. Effective incorporates all the costs which are directly attributable to the loan, and the nominal rate of interest only talks about the actual figures, which was in the written agreement with the bank. Okay, so this is the difference. Remember, The cash flow is always based on the nominal rate of interest. Now, this is the nominal rate of interest, and the finance cost is always based on the effective rate of interest. Okay? I hope this is clear now. Okay, a question that we have partially discussed before also, that there is a fair value model and there is a revaluation model. Are these two the same, or is there a difference between the two? Okay, so in this case, we are going to be very clear that revaluation model and fair value model are different. There are 3 to 4 differences in both of them. Number one, if we are talking about the fair value model, in that the fair value is calculated at every year end. Annually, the calculation is done. Then, if there is a gain, that also goes to P&L. If there is a loss, that also goes to P&L. In case of fair value model, let's suppose if you're talking about IAS 40. So in case of fair value model, you don't charge depreciation on the items which are held under the fair value model. So on the other hand, when we're talking about revaluation model, there are only 2 standards which have revaluation model included in them. I just told you these 2 models a few minutes ago. Can anybody tell me what are the 2 standards in which the revaluation model is tested? Can I see quickly? Well, we have a mix of answers. Yes, many of them are correct. Imad, you're absolutely right. IS 16 and IS 38. Remember, IS 40 has fair value model in it. It does not have revaluation model in it. Okay, and on the other hand, when we are talking about, so there are only 2 standards in the entire set of standards, which are IS 16 and IS 38, which have the revaluation model in them. Rest are all fair value model. Okay, so in case of IS 16 and IS 38, what is the accounting treatment and how does it vary from the fair value model in IS 40? I just told you that in case of IS 40, we have a fair value is calculated at every year end. So annual calculation is done. No depreciation is charged on the items which are held on fair value model. And thirdly, whether there is a gain or there is a loss, there is a fair value gain or there is a fair value loss, it will always go to P&L, right? On the other hand, when we are talking about the revaluation model, so in case of revaluation model, number one, the revaluation model is when a company makes a choice to move towards revaluation model, they have to commit that they are going to conduct the revaluation at regular intervals. So these intervals do not need to be every year. It can be 3 years, it can be 5 years, so regular intervals are decided. Secondly, if there is a gain on revaluation, it goes to OCI. If there is a loss on revaluation, that goes to P&L, right? And similarly, if you have to reverse a previous gain or loss, we've covered that comprehensively in our course, that if you have to reverse something, then you reverse it in the same place you charged it in the initial level. This I'll discuss very shortly. So in case of revaluation model, the gain goes to OCI, the loss goes to P&L. And thirdly, the revalued assets have to be depreciated every year. Okay, so depreciation needs to be charged. You cannot leave depreciation in this case. So this is a very major difference between the 2 models, and you have to be very careful in your exam when the examiner is referring to these models, that which one is he particularly talking about. Regarding the revaluation point that I was telling, again, it's normally a very frequently asked question. So I'll quickly explain it for you that, if the revaluation is happening for the first time, then the gain will always completely go to OCI and the loss will always completely go to P&L. However, if there was previously a gain and now there is a loss, so the gain would be lying somewhere in your OCI, right? So in the previous years, so you first reverse that gain in OCI and any over and above amount is charged to P&L. Similarly, if you're talking about a loss which was already there, so previously there was a loss of 100, now we have a gain of 120. We will first reverse the loss of 100 in P&L and only the over and above amount is going to go to OCI. So this is how the calculation is done. Okay, is that clear? We have another question related to this. Okay, a very good question. That when a question says what amount will be charged to statement of profit or loss, and so do we mention the amount being charged to OCI also? This is a very good question. Remember that, yes, when a question is asking you about the overall charge, there are times when the examiner particularly asks about an area. So normally the term that they use is the charge to statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income. Okay, so when the examiner uses the word P&L, it means that normally the treatment is only for P&L. Remember, guys, your examiner is your best friend. So your examiner tries to make your life much easier. So they always say that repeatedly they review the questions to make sure that whatever they're trying to ask, that is straightforward, visible to you. Okay, so over here, whenever we are talking about the charge, the examiner, if there is a part in OCI, that's going to go to that's going to say charge in P&L and OCI. The twist that comes in is that when the examiner asks what is the charge to P&L, and let's suppose an asset has a revaluation loss and depreciation. So when the examiner says, okay, so what is going to be the charge related to this asset in P&L, you have to include both. A lot of students will either only write the answer of depreciation or only the answer of revaluation loss. Okay, so that's what is tricky. And in case the examiner says P&L, write everything which is impacting P&L. Normally, the examiner does not confuse you by trying to mix P&L and OCI. If that's the case, then the statement will clearly say that what is the charge to P&L and OCI. Okay, another question. Any advice on section B and which area of the syllabus should we focus on? Remember that section B of the exam, as I said, it can come up from anywhere in the syllabus. That's actually true. I can't sugarcoat it. So just make sure that in every OT, there are possibly, if there are 5 questions, there are possibly going to be 3 questions which are numerical and 2 maybe straightforward theory questions. So just focus on the theory also and do a lot of practice. Honestly speaking, I'm focusing a lot on practicing OTs, because whether an OT is in the section A of the exam or section B of the exam, it's pretty much the same. In case of section A, there is one OT and the scenario related to it is given. In case of section B, 2-3 standards statements are written together and then the question is asked. So just practice a lot, and practicing for section A and B is going to be together. So just practice the kit, the questions that we've made available in the ECampus platform. They're unique, they're not from the past exam papers or kits, and do solve the questions which are there in the examiner report also. Guys, do read the examiner reports as well. That gives you a very good insight as to the mindset of the examiner. And remember a tip, something which has been declared wrong in one attempt or worst attempted in one attempt, there's a very high likelihood that it's going to come up again and again in the future also. We have another question that in case of revaluation at year end, is the asset revalued after being depreciated? That is true. if an asset is revalued at year end, remember, the whole accounting is based on matching or accruals concept. So if an asset was at the value of 1,000 throughout the year, and then at the year end, let's suppose at 31st December, we revalue it. The logic says, the matching concept says that it was at the value of 1,000 in the whole year. So charge the depreciation on that 1,000. If now, after evaluation, the value of the asset is 1,300, then this 1,300 is at the year end. So yes, if the revaluation is at year end, we first charge the depreciation on the old value of the asset, and then we charge the gain or loss at the year end. And on the other hand, I'll cover the start of the year also. If at the start of the year, we do the revaluation. So the asset's value was changed from 1,000 to 1,300 on 1st January. Then during the whole year, the asset was at the value of 1,300. In that case, you are going to charge the depreciation on 1,300. So it is very important. Whenever, guys, you get a question of revaluation, first thing you need to see is, when is the revaluation taking place? Is it at the start of the year, at the end of the year, or somewhere during the middle of the year? Okay, so based on that, you have to charge the depreciation also. I hope that clarifies the query. Okay, so we have another question that by covering the contents of week 1, can I attempt a CR question? To be honest, the answer is yes. You can, but no, because I will not recommend it at this stage. See, in our SKANS ECampus content, we have distributed the content based on the best way for your preparation. So for the first 3 weeks, I've allocated the content in a way that I want to focus on the knowledge of the concepts. And I'm going to ask you to solve a lot of smaller questions, objective test questions. Guys, once your concepts are clear, then I'm going to teach you, based on all of these concepts, how to solve a long question. The thing is that I don't want that when I'm teaching you how to solve a long form question, a CR question, you ask me, okay, so how can I calculate the interest overhead? How can I calculate the finance cost? How can I calculate the borrowing cost? How can I calculate the depreciation? No. The approach that I've used is that in the initial 3 weeks, I'm going to hone in all the knowledge which is required. I'm going to focus a lot on clearing the concepts by solving shorter examples. And then based on that, once you are done with it, then it's mostly a compilation of different OTs, which results in a CR question. So then we are going to handle how a CR question is actually solved. So yes, a CR question can be attempted at this stage, but I'm not going to go for it. The reason being, I want you to clear the knowledge first, and then we are going to combine that knowledge and solve the CR questions also. We're going to solve a lot of CR questions in our ECampus course. So don't worry, there's going to be enough practice for that as well. Okay, so what is the available material for practice of objective test questions? I believe we've covered this in another platform-based question. So you have the OTs, which are available in the SKANS ECampus. There is practice material, and then there is assignments. So both have objective test questions available in them, OTs and OT cases. Then you have past exam paper questions. In some of the past exam paper questions, the examiner published the OTs and OT cases also. Then there is the examiner reports, in which in every examiner report, you have 3 to 4 objective test questions which have been mentioned. Then you have the examiner approved kits, which have the practice material. So if you cover these materials, trust me, just understand properly the concept which is being tested. If you cover these resources, you're not going to see an unseen question in the exam. A maximum, if a miracle happens and you get the most difficult exam of all time, then maybe 2 marks or maximum 4 marks are going to be something that you've never seen before, a type of question that you've never seen before. But even that's not the case. Most of the cases, if you just cover the resources that I've mentioned, you will know already 100% of the exam, and you would have already covered it in one form or the other. Okay. How can I improve my overall performance in FR? Just follow the exam tips, practice a lot. Once we come to the CR questions, then also I'm going to focus a lot on the easy marks as well. So in the CR question also, we are going to see that how you are going to grab easy marks, because that's the trick. You first grab the easy marks in a question and then you get the more difficult marks. So grab the easy marks first. Be focused with respect to time distribution. Cover your questions on time. Do not delay it. And most important of all, if you want to improve your performance, you need to practice a lot. Just practice, practice, practice. There's so much material available in the ECampus platform. We have CRs, we have OTs, we have OT cases, you have kits, you have past exam papers. There is more than enough practice material available. Now it's on you how you're going to approach it and how you're going to actually solve it. Okay, so I think right now the questions that have been asked, we have covered all of them. So any further thing, we have last 2-3 minutes to the session. So any further thing that you'd like to ask, you can do it now. It can be from any part of the syllabus of FR. How many hours in a day should be allocated for study on average? I would say as many as possible. But to be honest, CK, I will have to see your performance of the week number 1 also to evaluate better. But I think I personally feel that even if you are regular and you're allocating, I'm talking about an average student. So for an average student, let's suppose if you're allocating maybe 3 hours per day, 3 to 4 hours, for listening to the recordings and then doing the practice, that's more than enough to make you easily pass the exam. Okay, but then again, it varies from student to student, so I won't really standardize it, because some people, they're quicker in picking concepts, some struggle with practice, so it varies from person to person. I would say that just keep the benchmark of the course that we have allocated for every week in our course plan. So that course plan, keep that in mind. You have to cover the allocated topics of the week within that week. If you just make sure of that and you practice alongside, you're good to go. Okay? Any last questions? We have 1 minute left in the session. So any further question? Okay, then. Thank you so much, guys, for joining in this session today. If you have any follow-up questions, you can drop me an email and ask. I'm already in touch with a lot of the enrolled students, or you can comment on the video of this live session, and I will personally respond to any of the questions which are subject related. So the options are open for you. Now is the time. If you start today, you can easily pass your exam in the upcoming exam attempt. Okay. So thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Best wishes for the exam. And thank you. Okay. So one last question. My pleasure, ZK. With respect to assignment, Umar, go through the recordings first, solve the practice questions, and then solve the assignment. Good for you that in the first week we have an objective test-based assignment. So you can solve it now. Also, it is auto-marked, and then there's explanation of answers also. Okay, guys, thank you so much. See you in the next session. Bye. Keep in touch through emails. Bye.